It is gearing up to be another big week in the Sean Combs sex trafficking trial. Testimony set to resume tomorrow, with another one of Combs' former assistants taking the stand. Last week concluded with rapper Kid Cudi, who testified about his brief relationship with Cassie Ventura. Kid Cudi said he was concerned for her safety as well as his own. He described the time when he says a jealous Combs broke into his home, locked his dog in a bathroom, and opened its Christmas gifts. The jury also saw photos of Kid Cudi's charred Porsche. Cudi testified he knew Combs had something to do with that damage. Joining me now, defense and trial attorney Misty Marris and former U.S. prosecutor Sarah Krissoff. Sarah and Misty, thank you so much for being here on Memorial Day, no doubt, when you could be doing a lot of other things. I'm going to start with you, Sarah. When we saw this testimony from Kid Cudi, how impactful and important was it for the words that came out of his mouth in the stand, but also they've had the whole weekend to sit with it?
Yeah, so the prosecution is trying to build the racketeering case, particularly through Kid Cudi, and hopefully from their viewpoint with witnesses to come. So I think that's been the area where there's been the least amount of testimony so far, but they're going to build that block by block and trying to, convince the jury there was some sort of enterprise and all of these people that were around Combs trying to cover up the crimes that were committed in furtherance of that enterprise.
Misty, as far as how the defense is handling some of this explosive testimony from Kid Cudi, who was very strong on the stand, according to our reporters who are in there watching this every single day, how is the defense handling itself so far?
Well, first of all, explosive is the perfect word, because the main point of that testimony from the prosecution's perspective was the Molotov cocktail that Kid Cudi says it was Combs and his affiliates, his associates, who blew up his car. And that is part of the predicate crimes prosecutors are seeking to establish of arson, which goes towards racketeering. But Sarah, I was actually in the courtroom for Kid Cudi's testimony, so I saw it. He was a great witness, but the defense was able to chip away at his testimony on cross and establish that he had no direct information. He didn't see anybody. There were no cameras. There was never an arrest. Basically throwing a little bit of doubt as to whether or not he could really say it was Combs or someone associated with Combs who actually did that damage to his car. So the defense did a good job. He also said that Cassie played him. This was his testimony, and that she was living a double life by dating both himself and Combs. Now, that speaks to her autonomy in the situation, that element of control. So the defense did an excellent job on cross-examination of getting that out in front of the jury.
Yeah, one of those moments that Kid Cudi had was saying that he saw Combs standing outside after that car was burned, looking like a supervillain, standing there with his hands behind his back. But I am curious about some of this coming in. There was no police report, there was no investigation, there was no arrest of Sean Diddy Combs at the time. Were you surprised that that came in, that the judge allowed that testimony and those pictures?
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's more to come on this, because it was a lot of supposition on behalf of Kid Cudi, saying this must have been him because we had this warning and then the thing happened. So it was, and that is always, frankly, a danger in a racketeering case. They have this huge swath of time that they're covering. There's lots of events. There's a real question of is all of this stuff properly before the jury?
Yeah, and that is something that obviously, if there's a conviction, that can come back up on appeal. Misty, I'm curious going forward this week, what you're expecting to hear, because so far, almost every single day of this trial has been jaw-dropping testimony.
Absolutely. So tomorrow, after this long weekend, we'll be back in session in court, and Capricorn Clark is set to take the stand now. She's come up in several different witness testimonies. She's been referenced. She's a longtime assistant and eventually became an executive at Bad Boy Records. So many of the witnesses that we've heard from so far that were affiliated or working for Combs were little snapshots of time. 2 years here, 2 years there. Capricorn Clark worked with him for a longer period of time. She also was referencing Kid Cudi's testimony that she had reached out to Kid Cudi and said, hey, Combs and some of his affiliates are at your house, are breaking into your house. So she's certainly going to be a very important witness. And my expectation for pre-trial is that she's going to testify about the means and methods of the criminal racketeering conspiracy that prosecutors are seeking to establish.
Yeah, and we're expecting, 6 weeks of the prosecution putting on its case and the defense doing its thing afterwards. I do want to ask you, Sarah, about some reporting that has come out from People. They talked to folks in the jail, and they said that Combs will have a chance to take part in a spades card game, dominoes, 3-on-3 basketball tournament, and a soccer tournament that were offered to prisoners for the holiday, as well as to have some barbecue. He is innocent until proven guilty, but is this the norm when you're in jail during a trial?
Listen, there is nothing that is good about being in the Metropolitan Detention Center. It's a pretty tough facility, and these types of pretrial facilities have a lot less access, outdoor time, educational programming that you would have at a post-trial facility. So listen, I think these are human comforts that he's being provided, but nothing out of
the norm. And this was provided for all, I think, of the inmates there. Thank you so much, Sarah, to you, and thank you to you, Misty. We will be back asking you more questions as this trial continues tomorrow.
Joining me now to discuss is CNN legal analyst and criminal defense attorney Joey Jackson. Joey, good morning. Thanks for being here.
Of course, Audie.
So since we have this pause in the proceedings, it's a good time to talk about the testimony that we've heard so far. For my money, rapper Kid Cudi was very much a remarkable witness. Can you talk about who stood out to you and why?
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, obviously, Kid Cudi, let's start there, was important because what he brings is, remember the charges, Audie. We're talking about a racketeering conspiracy, and what the government is alleging that this conspiracy existed over the course of 20 years. And in conspiracies of racketeering, what do you have? You have guns, drugs, money. But in addition to that, let's talk about what Cudi brought to the table. He talked about the issue of arson. He talked about the firebombing of his Porsche. That gets you to that. In addition to that, he talked about the burglary of his home, the removal of surveillance cameras. So that's certainly significant as it relates to what this alleged criminal enterprise was doing. However, he also gave something to the defense, and that was his relationship with Cassie Ventura. Who was she? She's the star witness of the government who had a long-term relationship with Sean Combs, and that relationship had a lot of violence, a lot of destructive behavior on the part of Combs, and that's what we saw the videotape that was played over and over for the jury. So there's no question that he was a central witness, but of course he said also that he dated her, that is Cassie Ventura, and he felt somewhat played because he didn't know that she was still with Combs. And so the defense will seize upon that to say, hey, she manipulated Cudi and she's manipulating you. In addition to him, though, we heard from a psychologist, and the psychologist was important because she spoke about how women behave when they have these real relationships that are predicated upon physical force and violence, etc., to go to show some of the conduct. Because remember, Audie, what we have here is not any testimony concerning him beating her and her saying, no, I'm not going to engage in these freak-off wild parties where there was this rampant, activity going on. And we have the reverse. We have certainly text messages and emails saying she can't wait to do it. So the psychologist was explaining why a woman who is controlled by a person would engage in that behavior. And of course, we heard from Cassie's mother as well with respect to something else you have in conspiracies and racketeering, right, which is extortion, wherein he, that is Combs, reached out to her and said, give me $20,000. She owes it to me. That is your daughter, and I want it, and the mother sent it. And so I think with Cassie and her mom and the psychologist, those were certainly compelling witnesses, and there were a variety of others as well.
Joey, it's sort of odd to understand this, but we're in the Me Too era, or post-Me Too era, and so much of this conversation is around Cassie Ventura's motivations. It's kind of the equivalent of like, not she deserved it, but did she want it? Did she participate in it? Is that surprising in what is essentially a RICO trial?
So what happens is that it is RICO, and RICO is usually used, right, in terms of getting mobsters and others who run criminal syndicates and bringing them to justice. Here you have it used against Sean Combs. But in addition to that, Audie, what you have is you have sex trafficking allegations. Now, in order for the government to get to the issue of sex trafficking, of course, it makes it federal because it's across state lines. Was this occurring in New York? Was it occurring in Florida, California, internationally, in fact? So they have to show that to make it federal. But you also have to show force or coercion. And so the reason that you have this battle, you have this psychologist, you have, this whole issue of whether it was forced or whether it was not, is because in order to get to trafficking, you have to show the element of coercion. And so that's the battleground here. If the defense shows that it was consensual and a freaky lifestyle, it's one thing, it's not guilty. If it's shown by the government that it was forced, it was coercive, and it was because of this abusive and controlling relationship, it gets you to another place. And that's why even in the Me Too generation and movement, we're hearing a lot about intentions, a lot about her intentions, a lot about the money she collected from him in a $20 million settlement, money that she got from the hotel with respect to this incident. And that's the real critical issue, is whether the government can show this coercive behavior that led to her not consenting at all. That's the question the jury will have to decide.
Many more witnesses this week. Joey Jackson, CNN legal analyst, thank you.